My name is Rock Arnett, and for my final project, I decided to look at March Madness and create a March Madness bracket or model to try to predict the winner of each of the 67 games. So the reason I did this was because I'm pursuing a career in sport analytics, and I thought this would be a fun way of combining my passion for sports, my career in sports analytics, and then also a current event that seems relevant to a lot of the individuals in the class. So a few concepts to look out for that I did throughout my project is I used lookup functions, specifically VLOOKUPs and XLOOKUPs. I used a lot of mega formulas, if statements. I also used the summing formula. And then in terms of formatting, I created tables. I used conditional formatting rules, and I also used name manager a lot. So if we look first here, I've created the actual bracket, the layout of the bracket, starting with just each of the games in the first round that were given to us by ESPN or CBS Sports. So on Selection Sunday, when they released the official bracket, I went ahead and put in the names of each of these teams. As you can see in the first round, Auburn played Alabama State, Louisville played Creighton, Michigan played UC San Diego, so on and so forth. Then if I look now at this page here, I have each of the teams and they're referencing the cells back on the previous page. So Auburn is referencing that C3 spot. So if any of the games changed, I could have typed in a different team name and it would have automatically updated here. So now a little bit about what I actually did was I started by scraping data from the NCAA website of the statistics for the rankings of each of the teams for several given categories in men's basketball. So you can see that I have a category for scoring offense, bench points, field goal percentage, scoring defense, free throw percentage, turnover margin, defensive boards, offensive boards, and then strength of schedule is last. And what it does is it gives the associated ranking for the top 100 teams in the respective category. Well, what I did was I said, okay, I'm gonna rank each of these teams, or I'm gonna find the rank of each of these teams, and then I'm gonna allocate each one of the teams a certain amount of points based off of their rankings for each of the categories. So you can see here, for example, we have Auburn was the first team, and what it's doing is I'm saying, okay, X lookup B2, so find the name Auburn from the table anywhere between B2 and B101, and then pull the associated ranking from A2 to A101, and then it returns that here. So if we look back at the scoring offense page, we can see that sure enough, Auburn is ranked 10th. So I did that for each of the different categories, pulling their ranking. This is where I got into a little bit of the conditional formatting too, is if the team didn't have a rank or they weren't one of the top 100 teams, then I had it return a 0, and then I conditionally formatted it so that the text of the 0 was colored white, so it wasn't distracting of the actual data that I have on this page or want to display on this page of the rankings. So I did that for each of the different categories. And then finally here in this section, I awarded points based off of the rankings. So what I did was I created a table of the different rankings, 0 to 100, and I allocated points. So here, again, if they were ranked 0, or if they received a 0 for not being the top 100, then I said, okay, their ranking is considered 0, and then also award them 0 points. So they're not receiving any points for that specific category. Well, if they were anywhere between 0 and 5, then they received 100 points. If they were between 5 and 10, they received 95, or I should say 6 and 10. If they were between 11 and 15, they got 88, so on and so forth. So now here's my first mega formula. If we look at this here, we're saying, okay, I want to take the sum of the allocated points for each one of the categories based off of their rank. So you can see here, okay, first look up C2. So C2 is here, my rank of 10, and then it takes me back to this table and it says, okay, well here is 6 to 10. Anywhere between 6 to 10, we give them 95 points. So that is returning 95. And then I do that for each of the different categories until it gives me my actual value. One thing to note though is that I did for the strength of schedule, I think that's one of the most determining characteristics of predicting a model for March Madness. So I multiplied it by 1.5 to kind of weight that a little bit heavier and allocate the points as so. So after I click enter, it gives me the sum of awarded points for the associated rankings for each of the categories for each team. I copied that all the way down. If we look for BYU, we can see that the Cougars, they ended up winning or receiving 375.5 points from my model. So now if we go back to this page, the predictions page, what I'm doing is I'm just essentially taking if statements, and I'm saying, okay, if, now I'm saying, okay, X lookup, again, I'm finding this value for Auburn, C3, and then I'm going to go back to my weighted rankings page, and I'm going to try to find the name Auburn anywhere in this column here, and then I want it to return the associated points that they received. And so it says, okay, find the number of points Auburn receives. If that number is greater than the number of points that Alabama State receives, then I want you to return the name Auburn. If not, I want you to return the name Alabama State. So if we click enter, we can see that obviously Auburn scored more points than Alabama State. And if we look at the weighted rankings page, that's true, with Auburn having 420 points and Alabama State in row 3 only having 113 points. So Auburn moves on to the next round. And then I used that formula throughout the entire thing until ultimately I had one winner. As you can see that this model didn't correctly predict the winner. It did have Florida in the final game against Duke. We saw that Duke lost in a heartbreaking game to Houston. But it did predict a lot of things right. If we look over here, we can see that it predicted BYU all the way, beating Wisconsin, which was an upset, and then playing Alabama and ultimately falling to Alabama. That was true. Alabama played Duke. They lost to Duke. That was also true. So it did do a fairly decent job at predicting the winner of each of the games. So that is a little bit about my model. I have other formulas. If I display each of the formula, you can see that the ranking that comes with each team is also another if function. So I have several different formulas, functions that ultimately led me to my winner here of Duke and created this nice model. This is significantly important in the sports analytics industry because athletes, players, coaches, managers of teams, they all use data, statistics, any information that they can get to become a better team. And so the more accurately you can predict certain values or certain things, the more money you can make, the better team you'll have, the better player you can be, so on and so forth. So yeah.